Nathaniel Thornhill's hands were covered in blood. Not his own hers. The woman had collapsed on his porch in the middle of a December blizzard, her 3 children clinging to her frozen body, the youngest one screaming words that would haunt him forever. "Please don't let Mama die." He hadn't hired a cook, hadn't posted any notice. But here she was, bleeding into the snow, a bullet wound in her shoulder and terror in her eyes that told him whoever shot her wasn't far behind. And for the first time in 7 years of being dead inside, Nate made a choice to live again. Before we dive into Clara and Nate's story, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss these incredible journeys of hope and second chances. Stay until the very end. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this unfolds. And drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now let's begin. December 1885. Redemption. Creek Ranch, Colorado Territory. The storm had been building for 3 days. Nate stood at the window of his ranch house, watching snow pile against the fences in drifts that would take a week to dig out. Winter up here at 7,000 feet wasn't just cold, it was a living thing with teeth. It killed slowly, freezing the weak and the unprepared, until they were just shapes under white blankets that nobody found until spring. He'd lost 6 head of cattle already, would probably lose more before February released its grip. "Boss?" Nate turned. Hiram Webb stood in the doorway, snow covering his hat and shoulders. The man was 65, a former slave who'd fought beside Nate at Gettysburg and saved his life when a Confederate bayonet had been seconds from opening his throat. 20 years later, Hiram was foreman of Redemption Creek Ranch, the closest thing Nate had to family. "We got a problem." "More cattle." "Worse." Hiram's dark face was grim. "There's someone at the gate. Woman and some kids. Wagons broke down about a quarter-mile out. They're trying to walk here." "In this?" Nate grabbed his coat. "They'll be dead in an hour." "That's what I'm saying." They rode out into the blizzard on horseback, the wind cutting through layers of wool like they were paper. Nate couldn't see more than 10 feet ahead. Snow blinded him, filled his mouth when he tried to shout directions to Hiram. Then he saw them. 4 shapes stumbling through knee-deep snow. The tallest one, a woman, was half carrying, half dragging the smallest child. 2 others staggered behind her, holding onto her coat. "Clara!" The woman's head snapped up. She tried to say something, took 2 more steps, and collapsed face first into the snow. The children screamed. Nate was off his horse before thought caught up with action. He reached the woman first, turning her over, and that's when he saw the blood. It had soaked through her coat on the left side just below her shoulder. The snow around her was stained pink. "She's shot." Hiram was already gathering the children. A girl, maybe 13, fought him like a wildcat. "Don't touch her. Get away from my mother." "Emmy, stop." Another child, a boy 9 or 10, grabbed his sister's arm. "He's helping." The smallest one just cried. A little girl, maybe 5, her face blue with cold. Nate lifted the unconscious woman into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, just bones and desperation wrapped in a threadbare coat. Her face was pale, lips colorless, but she was breathing. Barely. "Get them on the horses. Now." The ride back took forever. Nate held the woman against his chest, trying to shield her from the wind. Behind him, he could hear Hiram talking to the children in that calm, steady voice that had gotten them both through worse than this. "What's your names?" "Emmeline." The girl's voice was hostile, scared. "That's Tobias. The little one's Lucy." "Well, Emmeline, Tobias, Lucy, you hold tight now. We're almost there." "Is Mama going to die?" The little girl's question cut through the storm. Nate looked down at the woman in his arms. Her breathing had gotten shallower. The blood had soaked through his coat now. "Not if I can help it," he said. The ranch house erupted into controlled chaos. "Table, clear it." Nate laid the woman down while Hiram swept dishes and papers onto the floor. "We need hot water, clean cloths, whiskey." "On it." Hiram moved fast for a man his age. The three children huddled by the door, dripping melted snow, staring with huge, terrified eyes. Nate cut through the woman's coat with his knife. The bullet had entered high on her left shoulder, just below the collarbone. When he probed gently, he felt the exit wound in back. Through and through. Lucky. If the shot had been 6 inches lower, she'd already be dead. "Emmeline." The girl stepped forward, chin up, trying to be brave. "Can you help me?" "What do you need?" "Hold these cloths here. Press hard. We need to stop the bleeding." She moved to the table without hesitation. Her hands were small and cold, but they didn't shake as she pressed down on her mother's wound. "What's your mother's name?" "Clara. Clara Bennett." "How'd this happen, Emmeline?" The girl's jaw tightened. "A man shot her 2 days ago. We've been running ever since." Nate's hands stilled. "What man?" "His name's Victor Harlow. He's from St. Louis. Her voice cracked. "He won't stop looking for us." Hiram returned with supplies. While Nate cleaned the wound, the old man built up the fire and wrapped blankets around the 2 smaller children who hadn't stopped shaking. "This is going to hurt her," Nate said quietly to Emmeline. "The whiskey needs to go in the wound to prevent infection. I need you to hold her down if she wakes up." "I can do it." She could. When Clara's body jerked and her eyes flew open with a scream, Emmeline held her mother's arms with strength that shouldn't have existed in a 13-year-old girl. "Mama, you're safe. You're safe. Please, Mama." Clara's eyes found her daughter's face. "Emmy, I'm here. We're all here. This man's helping." Clara's gaze shifted to Nate. Even delirious with pain and blood loss, there was intelligence in those hazel eyes. Intelligence and bone-deep exhaustion. "Please." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Please don't send us back." "Nobody's sending anybody anywhere," Nate said. "Stay still. I'm almost done." He worked as fast as he dared, stitching the entrance and exit wounds with thread meant for mending saddles. It wasn't pretty, but it would hold. Clara passed out again halfway through, which was a mercy. When he'd finally bandaged her shoulder and covered her with every blanket they owned, Nate turned to the 3 children. They stood in a line like soldiers awaiting inspection. The oldest girl with her defiant chin and clenched fists. The boy silent and watchful old eyes in a young face. The little one sucking her thumb, tears dried in tracks on her cheeks. "When did you eat last?" They looked at each other. The boy spoke first. "Yesterday morning. Mama gave us the last of the bread." "And what did your mother eat?" Silence. "That's what I thought." Nate moved to the stove. "Hiram, help me here. We need to feed these kids before they collapse too." Within 15 minutes, they'd heated leftover stew and set out bread with butter. The children fell on the food like starving wolves, not even bothering with manners. Lucy ate so fast she choked. Emmeline had to pound her back until she could breathe again. Nate and Hiram exchanged glances. These kids hadn't eaten properly in days. Maybe weeks. "How long you been on the road?" Emmeline wiped her mouth. 4 months, maybe 5. We left St. Louis in August." "Where were you headed?" "Anywhere Victor couldn't find us." "This Victor Harlow." Nate kept his voice neutral. "What's he want with your mother?" The girl's face hardened into something that didn't belong on a child. "He wants to own her. Says she belongs to him. When she tried to leave, She stopped, glanced at her younger siblings. "He hurt her, so we ran. And he shot her. 2 days ago, we were camped outside Silver Point. He must have tracked us. Mama heard horses, woke us up, got us in the wagon. The shot came when we were trying to get away. Wheel broke a few miles out. We walked the rest. In a blizzard. We saw smoke from your chimney. Mama said to head for smoke, said smoke meant people, and people meant help. Emmeline's voice finally cracked. I didn't think we'd make it. Nate looked at Clara unconscious on his table. She'd walked miles in a blizzard with a bullet wound getting her children to safety before collapsing. The kind of strength that didn't come from muscle. It came from pure maternal will. You made it, he said quietly. You're safe now. For how long? The girl's question was sharp. Victor doesn't stop. He's rich. He has men. He'll come here. Let him come. The words were out before Nate could stop them. Hiram's eyebrows rose, but he said nothing. You don't understand. Emmeline stood up, her whole body trembling now that food was in her stomach, and the immediate crisis had passed. You can't fight him. Nobody can. He owns the law in St. Louis. He owns everything. This isn't St. Louis, and he doesn't own me. Why would you help us? You don't even know us. Good question. Nate had been asking himself the same thing since he'd lifted Clara's unconscious body from the snow. 7 years ago, he'd buried his wife, buried his heart with her, spent every day since then just existing, going through motions, waiting for nothing. But when he'd seen Clara collapse, something had sparked in the dead place where his chest used to feel things. Something that might have been anger, might have been purpose, might have been the simple fact that he was tired of being dead. Because it's the right thing to do, he said finally. Now finish eating. Hiram will show you where you can sleep. They put the children in the spare room upstairs. It had been a storage space for years, full of dust and old furniture, but Hiram cleared it out while Nate stayed with Clara. She didn't wake. Her breathing was shallow but steady. The bleeding had stopped. As long as infection didn't set in, she'd probably live. Probably. Nate sat beside the table-turned sickbed and studied the woman he'd just promised to protect from a man he didn't know. She was maybe mid-30s, though hardship made age difficult to judge. Dark auburn hair tangled and dirty. Strong features. High cheekbones, straight nose, full mouth pressed tight even in unconsciousness. Her hands were rough with work nails, broken calluses thick on her palms. Not a soft woman, not a woman who'd lived easy. Who are you, Clara Bennett? She didn't answer, but her hand twitched, fingers curling into a fist even in sleep. Fighting something. Running from something. Always running. Boss? Nate looked up. Hiram stood in the doorway. Kids are asleep. All three in one bed holding on to each other like they think someone's going to tear them apart. Maybe someone has. Multiple someones. This is trouble. Hiram's voice was quiet but firm. Whatever she's running from, it's going to follow her here. I know. And you're planning to let her stay anyway. It wasn't a question. I am. Hiram was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled up a chair and sat down across from Nate. You haven't been right since Margaret died. I've watched you turn into a ghost living in this house, but not really here. Working yourself near to death because you don't know what else to do. Hiram, let me finish. The old man's voice carried the authority of someone who'd earned the right to speak plainly. I'm glad you're finally feeling something again. Anger, purpose, whatever this is. But you need to understand what you're taking on. That woman has 3 kids, a bullet wound, and a violent man hunting her. You give her sanctuary, you become part of her war. I was in a war, remember? This ain't the same and you know it. Nate looked back at Clara, at the rise and fall of her chest, at the bandages wrapped around her shoulder already spotted with blood. She walked miles through a blizzard with a bullet in her. Got her children to safety before she let herself collapse. That's the kind of strength I haven't seen since... He stopped. Since Margaret. Yeah. Hiram sighed. You're going to do this no matter what I say, aren't you? I am. Then at least let me help. You're going to need it. They sat in silence, watching over Clara as the storm howled outside and the fire burned low. Somewhere upstairs, 3 children slept in a bed that wasn't theirs, in a house that didn't belong to them, protected by two men they'd just met. Temporary safety. That's all it was. But for tonight, it was enough. Fall. Clara woke near dawn. Nate had dozed off in his chair, his chin on his chest, when he heard the sharp intake of breath. His eyes snapped open to find Clara staring at him with wide, panicked eyes. Easy. He held up his hands. You're safe. You're at Redemption Creek Ranch. Remember, your daughter said you were headed for smoke. Clara's hand went to her shoulder, felt the bandages. Memory flooded back into her face. First confusion, then pain, then terror. My children. Where are? Upstairs, sleeping. All three of them. Fed and warm. She tried to sit up, gasped, and fell back. Don't move. You lost a lot of blood. The bullet went through clean, but you need to rest. I can't rest. Her voice was rough, urgent. He's coming. Victor's coming. We have to. Nobody's coming anywhere in this storm, and even if they were, they'd have to get through me first. Clara studied him with those sharp hazel eyes. Even weak and injured, there was steel in her gaze. Why would you help us? You don't know me. You needed help. I was here. Doesn't need to be more complicated than that. Everything is more complicated than that. She tried to sit up again. This time, Nate didn't stop her, just steadied her shoulder when she swayed. She looked around the room, his kitchen, his table, his home, taking inventory, like she was calculating odds of survival. What's your name? Nathaniel Thornhill. People call me Nate. I'm Clara Bennett. Your daughter told me. Emmeline talks too much. She's scared. They all are. Clara's face crumpled for just a second before she wrestled it back under control. I need to leave. As soon as the storm breaks. I won't bring my trouble to your door, Mr. Thornhill. Too late for that. And where exactly do you plan to go, back out into a blizzard with 3 kids and a bullet wound? I've managed worse. I don't doubt it, but you don't have to manage this time. Clara shook her head. You don't understand. Victor Harlow is not a man who lets go of things he thinks belong to him. He has money, he has men, and he has connections that reach farther than you can imagine. This is Colorado territory, not St. Louis. His connections don't mean much up here. They mean everything everywhere. He'll come for me. And when he does, anyone who helped me will pay the price. Nate leaned forward, keeping his voice low but firm. Mrs. Bennett, I've got about 6 questions, and you're going to answer them all before you make any decisions about leaving. First, where's your husband? Dead, 5 years. How? Steamboat explosion. James was the engineer. Second, how long were you with Victor Harlow? Clara's jaw tightened. 8 months. In St. Louis. Doing what? Surviving. He owned a restaurant. Said he'd give me work. I was desperate, had 3 mouths to feed. He seemed kind at first. At first. Men like Victor are always kind at first. Her voice went flat, emotionless. By the time you realize what they really are, you're already trapped. Third, why didn't you go to the law? Clara laughed, bitter and sharp. Victor is the law in St. Louis. He owns the sheriff, owns the judges, owns everyone who matters. When I tried to leave the first time, he had me arrested for theft. Said I stole from his restaurant. The charges were false, but it didn't matter. He made sure everyone knew I was a thief and a whore, and the only reason I wasn't in jail was his mercy. Nate felt something cold settle in his gut. He knew men like this. Had seen them during the war, officers who used their rank to abuse, to control, to destroy anyone weaker than them. Fourth, how'd you get away? I waited, planned, saved every penny I could hide. When Victor traveled to Chicago on business, I took the children and ran. That was 4 months ago. And he tracked you across half the country. He has private investigators. Probably offered a reward. People see a woman alone with 3 kids they remember. We've been moving every few weeks trying to stay ahead. She touched her shoulder. Wasn't fast enough this time. 5th. The shot 2 days ago. Where were you? Camped outside Silver Point. I heard horses just before dawn. Woke the kids, got them to the wagon. The bullet came as we were leaving. Whoever shot wasn't trying to kill me, just stop me. To take you back? Yes. 6th question. Nate held her gaze. What do you want to do? Clara was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice shook. I want my children to be safe. I want to stop running. I want... She stopped, swallowed hard. I want what I can't have, a normal life, a home, a future that isn't just survival. Then stay. Mr. Thornhill. Nate. Nate. She said his name like she was testing it. You're offering shelter to a woman you just met who has 3 children, a violent man hunting her, and nothing to offer you in return. Why? Good question. Nate had been asking himself the same thing all night. I buried my wife 7 years ago, he said finally. Lost her and our baby both in childbirth. Spent every day since then just existing, not living, just going through the motions. This ranch, these mountains, it all stopped meaning anything. I stopped meaning anything. He stood up, walked to the window. Dawn was breaking over the peaks, turning the snow gold. Then you collapsed on my porch last night, you and your kids. And for the first time in 7 years, I felt something besides empty. Felt angry that someone would shoot a woman in front of her children. Felt something. He turned back to Clara. So maybe I'm helping you for selfish reasons. Maybe I just need a reason to stop being dead. But the offer stands. You stay here, work for your keep if that makes it easier for your pride. Cook, clean, whatever you want. In return, you get safety. You get a home. And if Victor Harlow comes looking, he'll find out what happens when you threaten someone under my protection. Clara stared at him. Tears gathered in her eyes, but didn't fall. I don't know if I can accept that. The risk to you is mine to take. So what's it going to be? Clara Bennett, you going to trust me? The silence stretched. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. One of the children was awake. Finally, Clara nodded. 1 month. Trial period. If it gets dangerous, if Victor gets close, I leave. No arguments. Deal. And I work. I won't take charity. Didn't offer charity. Offered a job. A ghost of a smile crossed Clara's face. You're a strange man, Nate Thornhill. So I've been told. Footsteps on the stairs. Emmeline appeared, her hair wild from sleep, her eyes going immediately to her mother. Mama, I'm here, baby. I'm all right. The girl flew across the room and buried her face in Clara's good shoulder. Clara wrapped her arm around her daughter and held on tight. We're staying, Clara said softly. For a little while. We're staying. Emmeline pulled back, her face fierce. I can work. I'm strong. I can help with the horses and... We'll figure it out, Nate said. Right now your mother needs rest, and you need to keep being the brave girl you've been. I'm not brave. I'm scared all the time. Being scared and doing it anyway. That's the definition of brave. 2 more sets of footsteps. Tobias and Lucy appeared, hovering in the doorway. Come here, both of you. Clara opened her other arm. They came. All 3 children gathered around their mother like she was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting under their feet. Nate looked at Hiram, who'd been standing quiet in the corner the whole time. We're going to need to make that spare room more permanent. And get these kids some proper clothes. And about 100 other things, Hiram finished. I'll make a list. Do that. Nate grabbed his coat. Where are you going? Clara asked. Into town. Storm's breaking. If Victor's men are still around, I need to know. Plus, we need supplies. Medical supplies for you, food for 4 extra mouths. Everything else. Be careful. Always am. He wasn't. Hadn't been careful since Margaret died, but maybe it was time to start being careful again, now that he had someone to be careful for. The ride into Silver Point took 2 hours through snow that was already starting to melt under a brutal winter sun. By the time Nate reached town, the main street was a river of mud and slush. He tied his horse outside Wong's general store and went inside. Michael Wong looked up from behind the counter, his weathered face creasing into surprise. "Nate Thornhill, twice in 1 month. Must be serious. Need supplies. A lot of them. Must be very serious." Michael pulled out paper and pencil. "What do you need?" Nate ran down the list. Food, medicine, clothes for 3 children, 2 girls and a boy, varying sizes. Michael's eyebrows climbed higher with each item. "You starting an orphanage, Nate?" "Something like that." "This wouldn't have anything to do with the woman and kids people saw heading toward your ranch 2 days ago, would it?" Nate's hand stilled. "What people?" "Some men, city types, riding good horses, wearing expensive coats. They've been asking questions. About a woman with 3 children. Dark hair, traveling alone. Said she stole something valuable." "What did you tell them?" "Same thing everyone else told them, that we hadn't seen anybody matching that description." Michael's eyes were sharp. "Should we have said something different?" "No, you said exactly right. These men, Nate, they're not nice. They've been throwing money around, making threats, and the one in charge—" Michael lowered his voice. "He scares me, has eyes like a snake. His name Victor. Victor Harlow, out of St. Louis. You know him." "Not yet, but I'm going to." Michael was quiet for a moment, then started gathering supplies. "The woman and kids, they with you now?" "They are." "She in trouble. The kind of trouble where a man thinks he owns her. The kind where he shot her rather than let her go." Michael's mouth thinned. "My grandfather came to this country with nothing. Was treated like he was less than human for years. I know what it's like when powerful people think they can own you." He added extra supplies to Nate's pile: blankets, warm coats, even some candy for the children. "On the house. Consider it my contribution to pissing off rich bastards who think they can buy anything they want." "Michael, don't argue. Just keep those kids safe. And Nate." Michael's expression turned serious. "Victor Harlow and his men are staying at the Grand Hotel. They're not leaving town. They're waiting." "For what?" "For the storm to clear. And then they're going to search every ranch and homestead within 100 miles. Nate nodded slowly. "When they come to my place, I'll be ready." "I believe you will." Nate loaded his supplies and was heading back to his horse when a voice stopped him cold. "You're Thornhill." He turned. 3 men stood in the muddy street. City clothes, expensive boots, the kind of confident stance that came from never having been told no. The one in the middle was tall, well-fed, with slicked back dark hair and cold blue eyes. He smiled, but it didn't reach those eyes. "I'm Victor Harlow. I believe you have something that belongs to me." Nate's hand didn't move toward his gun. Didn't need to. The weight of it against his hip was reminder enough that violence was always just a heartbeat away. "I don't own anything that belongs to you, Harlow." Victor's smile widened. Up close, he was maybe 50, with the kind of well-fed face that came from too much money and too little conscience. His coat probably cost more than Nate paid his ranch hands in a year. "Now that's not entirely true, is it? I'm looking for a woman. Clara Bennett. Dark hair, 3 children. She stole a considerable amount of money from my establishment in St. Louis. I have reason to believe she's on your property." "Your reason would be wrong." "Is that so?" Victor pulled a folded paper from his coat. "I have a statement here from a shepherd who saw a woman and children heading toward Redemption Creek Ranch 2 days ago, just before the storm hit." "Shepherd's mistaken. Or you're lying." Victor's voice lost its friendly edge. "Mr. Thornhill, I'm trying to handle this civilly. Clara is confused, possibly ill. She needs proper care, and those children need stability. I'm offering to take them back to St. Louis where they belong." "Children belong with their mother." And Clara belongs with me. There it was, the truth stripped of its civilized veneer. Victor Harlow didn't care about Clara's welfare or the children's stability. He cared about possession, about not letting something he considered his property escape. Nate had seen that look before, in the eyes of officers who'd beaten their subordinates, in the faces of men who'd rather burn their own fields than let the enemy take them. The look of someone who'd destroy what they couldn't control. If Clara Bennett shows up at my ranch, Nate said carefully, I'll be sure to let the proper authorities know. The proper authorities answer to me. Maybe in St. Louis, not here. Victor's two companions shifted hands drifting toward their coats. Nate didn't move, but his body tensed, ready. The street had gone quiet. People had stopped to watch, sensing violence in the air, like animals smelling a storm. You're making a mistake, Thornhill. I'm a patient man, but my patience has limits. When I find Clara, and I will find her, anyone who helped her will regret it. That a threat? It's a promise. Then let me make you a promise, Harlow. Nate took a step forward. Victor's men moved to intercept, but Nate ignored them, keeping his eyes locked on Victor's. You show up at my ranch, you'd better have the law with you. Real law, not whatever bought and paid for version you're used to. Because if you come onto my property making threats, you'll find out what happens to men who hurt women and scare children. Victor's face flushed. You sanctimonious. We done here. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Victor smiled again, that cold, empty smile. For now, but this isn't over. No, I expect it's not. Nate turned his back, a calculated insult, and walked to his horse. He could feel Victor's stare burning into his spine, but he didn't look back. Didn't mount up until he'd loaded all his supplies and taken his time adjusting the saddle. Only when he was riding out of town did he let himself breathe. He'd just declared war. And wars, Nate knew from experience, always cost more than you expected to pay. The ride back to the ranch felt longer than the ride out. Every shadow looked like an ambush. Every sound made his hand drift toward his gun. By the time he crested the ridge overlooking Redemption Creek, the sun was starting its descent, turning the snow-covered peaks the color of blood. Hiram met him at the barn. How bad? Victor Harlow's in town. Has two men with him, probably more scattered around. He knows Clara's here. How? Shepard saw them heading this way. Harlow's got money to loosen tongues. Hiram's jaw tightened. So what do? We get ready, post watches, make sure the rifles are loaded, and we keep those kids safe. Boss, we're two men against who knows how many. Then we'd better be smart about it. They worked into the evening, checking ammunition, positioning rifles at strategic windows, planning fields of fire. It felt like the war all over again, that same sick anticipation, knowing violence was coming, but not when or from where. Clara was awake when Nate came inside. She sat at the kitchen table, her injured arm in a sling, peeling potatoes one-handed, while Lucy sat in her lap, chattering about the snow. The domestic scene was so normal, it hurt. Mama, can I go play outside tomorrow? We'll see, sweetheart. But I want to make snow angels. Lucy, enough. Clara's voice was gentle but firm. Go check on your brother and sister upstairs. Lucy pouted but obeyed, scrambling down and running for the stairs. The moment she was gone, Clara's composure cracked. He's here, isn't he, Victor? Nate set down his supplies. In Silver Point, asking questions. Then we have to leave, tonight, before he... You're not leaving, you're barely healed, and where would you go? It's 10 below out there. I won't let him hurt you. I won't let my children see more violence because of me. Clara. Nate sat across from her. Listen to me. Running didn't work. He found you anyway. So this time we stand and fight. You don't understand what he's capable of. I understand he's a bully who's used to getting his way because nobody's ever stood up to him. Well, I'm standing up. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Why? Why would you risk everything for us? It was the second time she'd asked. And Nate still didn't have a good answer. Or maybe he did, but it was too raw to speak aloud. Something about Clara and her children had cracked open the ice around his heart. Something about the way she kept fighting, kept protecting, kept loving despite everything the world had thrown at her. She reminded him that strength wasn't about never falling. It was about getting back up. Because it's right, he said finally. And because I'm tired of being a coward. You're not a coward. I've been hiding in this house for 7 years, hiding from life because I was scared of losing someone again. That's cowardice, Clara. You've lost more than I have, and you're still fighting. That's courage. She reached across the table and took his hand. Her fingers were rough and cold, but the touch sent warmth through his whole body. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. They sat like that until Emmeline's voice called from upstairs asking if dinner was ready. Clara pulled her hand back, wiping her eyes quickly. I should feed them. I'll help. They worked together in comfortable silence. Clara gave instructions, and Nate followed them, cutting bread and setting the table while she stirred soup one-handed. When the children came down, they ate together, all 6 of them crowded around the table, like they'd been doing this for years instead of 2 days. Tobias still hadn't spoken, but he watched Nate with curious eyes. Lucy chattered enough for 3 children, and Emmeline kept glancing between her mother and Nate with a calculating expression that made him nervous. After dinner, Clara insisted on cleaning up despite her injury. The children helped, and Nate found himself relegated to sitting by the fire, listening to their voices, their laughter, their normalcy. This was what he'd lost when Margaret died. Not just a wife, but a family. The sound of life filling empty spaces. Mr. Thornhill. He looked up. Tobias stood in front of him holding something. A piece of paper covered in pencil drawings, horses, mountains, a house that must be the ranch. This is good work, son. Tobias's mouth moved, but no sound came out. His face screwed up in frustration. It's all right, Nate said gently. You don't have to talk. But if you want to draw, I've got a whole box of pencils and paper upstairs. Used to sketch some myself back in the war. The boy's eyes lit up. He pointed at Nate, then at himself, then mimed drawing. You want me to draw with you? Tobias nodded vigorously. All right then. Tomorrow. After chores. Deal. The boy broke into a huge smile and ran back to his mother, waving the paper excitedly. Clara caught Nate's eye over Tobias's head and mouthed, "Thank you." That night, Nate took first watch. Hiram would relieve him at midnight. He positioned himself at the window, overlooking the main approach rifle across his knees, trying not to think about what would happen if Victor came with more men than they could handle. Around 10, Clara came down wrapped in a blanket. You should be resting. Can't sleep. She sat beside him, careful of her injured shoulder. Every sound makes me jump. He won't come tonight. Too dark, too cold. Men like Victor don't risk discomfort when they can pay someone else to take the risk. How do you know so much about men like him? Had officers like that during the war. Rich boys playing soldier, sending poor boys to die because they were too cowardly to fight themselves. Nate's voice went hard. Watched one order his entire company to charge a fortified position because he wanted glory. 90 men went over that ridge. 14 came back. Were you one of them? Yeah, me and Hiram. We dragged each other out of that hell. He looked at Clara. That's how I know Victor won't do his own dirty work. He'll send men, probably hired guns, and he'll stay safe in town while they risk getting shot. Clara was quiet for a moment. I was married to James for 10 years. He was kind, gentle, worked himself to death providing for us. When he died in that explosion, I thought my life was over. Thought I'd never survive losing him. But you did. I had to. Had 3 children depending on me. She pulled the blanket tighter. For 4 years, I took whatever work I could find, sewing, washing, cooking. Barely made enough to feed them. Then I met Victor. He offered me a job in his restaurant. Good wages, respectable work. I thought he was a godsend. When did you realize he wasn't? About a month in. He started making comments about how grateful I should be, how he'd rescued me from poverty. Then the comments became demands: work longer hours, smile more at customers, wear dresses he bought me. Her voice dropped. Then he said I owed him, that everything I had came from his generosity, and if I wanted to keep it, I'd better show proper appreciation. Nate's hands tightened on his rifle. He hurt you. Not at first, just intimidation, making me feel like I was crazy for being uncomfortable. But then one night I told him I wanted to quit, find different work. He grabbed my arm so hard he left bruises, said I wasn't going anywhere, that I belonged to him now, and if I tried to leave, he'd make sure I never worked anywhere again. Why didn't you go to the police? Clara laughed bitterly. The police chief ate free at Victor's restaurant. The judge played cards in Victor's back room. Every person with power in St. Louis either owed Victor money or favors. I was nobody, a poor widow with kids. Who was going to believe me over him? Someone should have. But nobody did, so I stayed. Tried to keep my head down, do my work. Keep Victor happy enough that he'd leave me alone. Didn't work. He got more possessive. Started talking about how the children needed a father. How he'd marry me and take care of everything. You said no. I said I needed time. Kept putting him off. And then one day a merchant named Thomas Webb saw Victor grab me in the alley behind the restaurant. Saw him hit me when I tried to pull away. Thomas intervened. Told Victor to leave me alone. Clara's voice broke. Victor shot him, right there in the alley, then claimed Thomas had tried to rob him. Self-defense. Jesus. That's when I knew I had to run, because Victor had just killed a man in broad daylight and gotten away with it. And if I didn't get my children away from him, we'd never escape. So you planned. For 3 months. Saved every penny. Made arrangements with a woman who ran a boarding house. She agreed to hold mail for me, forward letters, if I sent an address. Waited until Victor went to Chicago on business. Then I took the children and ran. She turned to look at Nate, her hazel eyes fierce, even in the darkness. I've been running for 4 months. 4 months of looking over my shoulder, jumping at shadows, moving every time someone looked at us too long. 4 months of my children asking when we could stop, when we could have a real home again. And I didn't have an answer. You have one now. Do I? Victor found us, Nate. He always finds us. Because you were alone. This time you're not. Clara studied his face. You really mean that? You're willing to fight for people you barely know. I know enough. Know you're brave and strong, and you love your children more than anything. Know you've been dealt a raw hand, and you're still playing it the best you can. That's enough for me. Nate. Her voice was soft, now vulnerable. What happens if he wins? If he takes me back, takes the children? What will you do? Won't happen. But if it does? It won't. Nate looked her in the eye. I lost Margaret because I couldn't control what was happening. Couldn't stop the fever. Couldn't save her or our baby. Couldn't do a damn thing except watch them die. I swore I'd never feel that helpless again. So no, Clara. Victor's not taking you, not while I'm breathing. A tear slipped down her cheek. You're a good man, Nathaniel Thornhill. I'm a man who's been dead for 7 years and just remembered what it feels like to be alive. That's all. They sat in silence after that, watching the snow fall outside the window. Somewhere in the distance a wolf howled. The sound echoed off the mountains, lonely and wild. At midnight, Hiram came to relieve him. Nate walked Clara back to her room, the small bedroom off the kitchen that he'd cleared out for her. The children slept upstairs, but Clara wanted to be on the ground floor closer to the door, just in case. Always planning for the worst. Always ready to run. Try to sleep, Nate said. You're safe here. I haven't felt safe in a very long time. Then it's time you did. He turned to leave, but Clara caught his hand. Nate. If something happens, if Victor gets through, promise me you'll protect the children. Not me. Them. Nothing's going to... Promise me. The desperation in her voice made his chest ache. She really believed Victor would win. Believed she was going to lose. I promise. But it won't come to that. She nodded, not believing him, and closed the door. Nate stood in the dark hallway and wondered what kind of hell Clara had lived through that she couldn't even imagine safety anymore. Couldn't even let herself hope. He was going to have to teach her. Teach her that not all men were like Victor. That some men kept their promises. That this time, she didn't have to fight alone. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Nate woke to the smell of coffee and found Clara already in the kitchen cooking breakfast one-handed. Emmeline helped her, moving with the practiced efficiency of a child who'd learned domestic skills too young. You should be resting. I've rested enough, and staying busy keeps me from thinking too much. They ate together again, bacon and eggs and fresh bread. Lucy spilled her milk, and Tobias cleaned it up without being asked. Emmeline barely ate, her eyes constantly darting to the windows. Emmy, you need to eat, Clara said gently. Not hungry. Emmeline. The girl's head snapped up. How can you all just sit here like everything's normal? He's out there. Victor's out there. And we're acting like it's just another morning. Because it is just another morning, Nate said. We can't stop living because we're scared. Easy for you to say. He's not hunting you. He is now. The moment I told him to stay off my property, I made myself his enemy. So we're in this together. Emmeline stared at him. Why would you do that? We're nothing to you. You're not nothing. We're strangers. You don't owe us anything. Nate set down his fork. Emmy, I'm going to tell you something important. When I was your age, I lived on a farm in Kansas. We had neighbors, the Johnsons. Good people. Then one day raiders came through. Burned farms, killed anyone who resisted. They hit the Johnsons' place first. My father heard the screams and ran to help. He paused, remembering. I wanted to go with him, but he said no. Said I should stay with my mother, keep her safe. So I did. And I listened to the shooting. Listened to the Johnsons die while my father tried to save them. He came back with 3 Johnson children, the only ones who survived. We took them in, fed them, clothed them, raised them like they were ours. Why are you telling me this? Because when I asked my father the same question, you just asked, why help strangers? He said something I never forgot. He said, we help because somebody has to. Because if good people stand by and do nothing, evil wins. And I'll be damned if I let evil win without a fight. Nate looked at each of the children. That's why I'm helping you. Not because I owe you. Because it's right. And because your mother is the bravest woman I've ever met, and you 3 are proof that love can survive anything. That's worth fighting for. Emmeline's eyes filled with tears. She looked at her mother, then back at Nate. We're going to fight, aren't we? Really fight? If we have to, yes. Good. The girl's voice was fierce. Because I'm tired of running. I'm tired of being scared. I want to fight back. Emmy, Clara started. No, Mama. I'm 13. I'm old enough. If Victor comes, I want to help. Nate considered. The smart thing would be to send all the children away somewhere safe. But where was safe? And how would Clara handle being separated from them? Can you shoot? Clara's head snapped up. Nate, no. Can you? He repeated to Emmeline. I've never tried. Then you're going to learn, all of you. Even Lucy, basic safety at least. If something happens, I need you to know how to protect yourselves. This is insane, Clara said. They're children. They're targets. Victor sees them as leverage to control you. We need to take that leverage away. By teaching them to shoot. By teaching them to be brave. To stand their ground. To know they're not helpless. Nate stood up. Emmy, Tobias, get your coats. We're going to the barn. The children scrambled up, excited despite everything. Lucy started to follow, but Clara caught her. Not you, baby. You're too little. But Mama. No arguments. Lucy pouted, but stayed. Clara stood too, her face pale. This is wrong. This is necessary. Nate softened his voice. Clara, I know you want to protect them from violence, but they've already seen violence, already lived through hell. Now we teach them how to survive it. They're not soldiers. No, they're your children, and they deserve every tool we can give them to stay alive. Clara closed her eyes. When she opened them again, resignation had replaced fear. If you do this, you teach them right. Safety first. Respect for the weapon. No games. Never. He took Emmeline and Tobias to the barn where Hiram was already working. Teaching kids to shoot now, the old man asked. Teaching them to defend themselves. Same thing. Hiram pulled out 2 old rifles. Start with these, lighter, easier to handle. For the next 2 hours, Nate drilled them on basics. How to hold the rifle, how to aim, how to breathe. He didn't let them fire yet, just got them comfortable with the weight, the feel, the responsibility. Emmeline was a natural. Steady hands, good eye, listened to instructions. Tobias struggled more, but he was patient, taking his time. You're doing good, both of you, Nate said. Tomorrow we'll do actual shooting. But for now, this is enough. They walked back to the house to find Clara teaching Lucy how to roll out pie dough. The domestic scene was so normal it felt surreal given what was coming. That afternoon, a rider appeared on the ridge. Hiram spotted him first. Boss, we got company. Nate grabbed his rifle and moved to the porch. The rider stayed at a distance too far to shoot, but close enough to see clearly. He sat his horse for maybe 5 minutes just watching the ranch. Then he turned and rode away. Reconnaissance, Hiram said. They're planning something. How many you figure? Victor had 2 men in town yesterday. Could be more now. Could be hired guns from Denver. So what do? We wait. And we don't sleep much. That night, Nate stood watch again. Clara joined him around 11 wrapped in blankets. Can't sleep. Keep having nightmares. Victor finding us. Taking the children. She shivered despite the blankets. I dream Lucy's screaming for me and I can't reach her. That won't happen. You can't promise that. I can promise I'll die before I let him take her. Clara looked at him. That's what I'm afraid of. That you'll get hurt because of us. Been hurt before. Survived it. Have you? Her voice was soft. Or are you just walking around with wounds that never healed? The question hit harder than expected. Nate thought about Margaret, about the baby they'd lost, about 7 years of going through motions without really living. Maybe both, he admitted. Maybe I'm wounded and surviving. But maybe having you and your kids here is starting to heal those wounds. Ever think of that? I think you're being too good to us. Not possible. They sat in comfortable silence until Clara spoke again. Tell me about Margaret, your wife. Nate hadn't talked about Margaret in years, but something about the darkness, about Clara's presence beside him, made him want to. She was small, barely 5 feet, but she had a spirit bigger than anyone I've ever known. Could charm a snake into dancing, make you laugh when you wanted to cry. She loved this ranch more than I did, I think. Loved the mountains, the space, the wildness of it all. How did you meet? Her father owned the mercantile in Silver Point. I came in for supplies one day, and she was behind the counter. Argued with me about the price of nails for 20 minutes. I think I fell in love right then. Clara smiled. She sounds wonderful. She was, and she wanted children so badly. We tried for years. Finally it happened. She was so happy. His voice thickened. And then everything went wrong. You don't have to talk about it. I was driving cattle to market. Routine trip supposed to be gone a week, but we ran into trouble. Rustlers lost cattle. Everything that could go wrong did. I was gone almost a month, and Margaret went into labor early, alone. By the time I got back, he stopped, couldn't finish. Clara's hand found his in the darkness. I'm sorry. She held on for 3 days after I got home, just long enough to tell me she loved me, to say goodbye. And then she was gone. Her and our baby both. It wasn't your fault. I know that in my head, but my heart hasn't figured it out yet. He looked at Clara. For 7 years I've been punishing myself, working until I collapsed, not eating, not sleeping, trying to suffer enough that it would balance out what Margaret suffered. That's not what she would have wanted. No, she would have wanted me to live, to be happy, to find someone else and build a new life. He squeezed Clara's hand. I think she would have liked you. You don't know that. I do. Because you're strong like she was, brave like she was, and you love your children with the same fierce devotion she would have brought to ours. Clara's eyes shimmered with tears. Nate, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just know that you being here, you and your kids, it's the first time I've felt alive since Margaret died. The first time I've wanted to fight for something instead of just existing. So thank you. For what? For reminding me what it means to be human. They sat together until Hiram came to relieve them. When Clara stood to go back to bed, she leaned down and kissed Nate's forehead. Thank you for telling me about her. About Margaret. Thank you for listening. She left, and Nate sat in the darkness, feeling the ghost of her kiss on his skin, wondering when exactly he'd started falling for Clara Bennett. Wondering if he was betraying Margaret by feeling something for someone else. But no. Margaret would have wanted this. Would have wanted him to love again, to live again, to stop being a walking corpse in a dead man's house. So maybe it was time to let himself feel. Let himself hope. Let himself believe that Clara and her children weren't just people he was helping, but the beginning of a new family, a new life, a new reason to wake up in the morning. If Victor Harlow wanted to take that away, he was going to find out what happened when you tried to steal hope from a man who'd been without it for 7 years. He was going to find out that some things were worth dying for, and some people were worth killing for. The attack came 3 days later, just after dawn, when the world was still gray and quiet. Nate was in the barn checking on the horses when he heard the first shot. The bullet punched through the barn wall 6 inches from his head, splintering wood and sending splinters flying. He dropped to the ground on instinct, years of war training kicking in before his mind could catch up. Hiram. Here. The old man was already moving rifle in hand, crouching low, as he made his way to Nate's position. 4 riders, maybe 5, coming from the East Ridge. Get to the house, protect the family. What about you? I'll keep them busy. Go. Hiram ran in a crouch toward the house, while Nate positioned himself behind a water trough. Another shot rang out, this one hitting the trough with a metallic clang. Water began leaking from the hole. Nate risked a look over the edge. 5 riders spread out, moving toward the ranch in a loose formation. Professional. They knew what they were doing. Victor had hired competent men. He aimed carefully and fired. One of the riders jerked and fell from his horse. The others immediately scattered, looking for cover. That's 4, Nate shouted, chambering another round. Who wants to be next? The answer came in a volley of gunfire that forced him back behind the trough. Bullets tore through the barn, through the fence posts, kicking up dirt all around him. He was pinned. Inside the house, Clara heard the shooting, and her blood turned to ice. Emmeline, get your brother and sister into the root cellar, now! But Mama, now! The girl grabbed Tobias and Lucy, pulling them toward the kitchen and the cellar door. Lucy was crying, her small hands clutching her brother's shirt. I'm scared. I know, baby, but you have to be brave. Emmeline's voice shook, but held firm. She got the cellar door open and pushed her siblings down the ladder. Stay down here. Don't come up no matter what you hear. Where are you going? Tobias signed the words, his face white with fear. To help. She slammed the door shut before they could argue and ran back to the main room where Clara and Hiram were positioning themselves at windows. I told you to stay in the cellar, Clara said. And I'm 13, not 3. Give me a rifle. Emmy. Mama, we practiced. I can help. Another bullet shattered a window, raining glass across the floor. Clara made a decision she prayed she wouldn't regret. Stay low. Don't fire unless you have a clear shot. And if I tell you to run, you run. Understand? Yes, ma'am. Hiram handed Emmeline a rifle and positioned her at the far window where she'd have cover. The girl's hands shook as she gripped the weapon, but her jaw was set with determination. How many? Clara asked. 4 now. Nate got 1. Hiram peered through his window. They're spreading out, trying to surround us. Where's Nate? Barn. He's pinned. Clara's heart clenched. She moved to the window facing the barn and saw Nate crouched behind the water trough, bullets tearing up the ground around him. He was trapped, and they both knew it. I have to get to him. You can't. Hiram's voice was firm. You step out that door, you're dead. I can't just leave him out there. He's doing his job, which is keeping them focused on him instead of this house. We do our job by staying alive and making sure those kids stay safe. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to scream, but she knew Hiram was right. She raised her rifle and aimed at one of the riders who'd gotten too bold moving toward the barn. She'd never shot at a person before, never even considered it. She pulled the trigger. The recoil slammed into her injured shoulder and she cried out in pain. The bullet went wide, hitting nothing but dirt, but it was enough to make the rider dive for cover. Good, Hiram said. Keep them scared. Keep them moving. Out in the barn, Nate was calculating odds and not liking the numbers. 4 men, all with clear fields of fire. He was pinned in place with limited ammunition and no way to reach the house without crossing 30 yards of open ground. But he couldn't stay here. Eventually, they'd flank him, and then he'd be dead. He needed a distraction. The hay in the barn was dry, and he had matches in his pocket. If he could create enough smoke, enough chaos, he might be able to make it to the house under cover. It was a terrible plan, but it was the only plan he had. He grabbed a handful of hay, struck a match, and tossed the burning bundle into the corner of the barn. Within seconds, flames were licking up the walls. "Boss, what are you doing?" Hiram shouted from the house. Nate didn't answer. He waited until the smoke was thick enough, then burst from cover and ran. Bullets chased him across the yard. He felt one tug at his coat, felt another pass so close to his head he heard it whistle. 20 yards, 15, 10. A bullet caught him in the leg. He went down hard, rolling through the snow, coming up on one knee. His leg was on fire but still working. He forced himself up and staggered the last few yards. Hiram threw the door open and dragged him inside. "You crazy bastard! You just burned down your own barn." Seemed like a good idea at the time. Nate collapsed against the wall, breathing hard. Blood soaked through his pants where the bullet had creased his thigh. Not deep, but painful as hell. Clara was beside him immediately, her hands gentle but efficient as she cut away his pant leg to examine the wound. "It went through. You're lucky." "Don't feel lucky." "Hold still." She grabbed whiskey and poured it over the wound. Nate bit back a curse. "Emmy, get me bandages." The girl ran to comply while Clara worked to stop the bleeding. Outside the barn was fully engulfed now, flames shooting 30 feet in the air, smoke billowing across the ranch. "Well," Hiram said, "at least they can't use it for cover now." Small victories. Nate tried to stand, and Clara pushed him back down. "You're not going anywhere. They're still out there. And you're bleeding. Let Hiram and me handle it. Mama knows how to shoot." Emmeline sounded surprised as she returned with bandages. "Your mama knows how to do a lot of things." Clara wrapped Nate's leg tightly. "When you're poor and alone, you learn fast, or you die." The shooting outside had stopped. The attackers had pulled back, probably regrouping now that their element of surprise was gone, and the barn fire had created a smokescreen. "They'll be back," Hiram said. "Probably wait until dark. Then we use the time we have." Nate gritted his teeth against the pain. "Board up the broken windows. Move furniture to block the doors. Make this place into a fortress." They worked quickly. Emmeline proved surprisingly strong, helping Hiram drag the heavy kitchen table to barricade the front door. Clara moved between helping them and checking on Tobias and Lucy in the cellar, reassuring them through the door that everything was fine. Everything was not fine. 4 armed men were outside waiting for nightfall to finish what they'd started. The barn was gone. Nate was injured. And somewhere in Silver Point, Victor Harlow was probably sipping coffee and waiting for news that Clara had been captured. "What's he going to do with us?" Emmeline asked quietly. She stood at the window, rifle held ready, staring out at the smoke-filled yard. "Victor, I mean, when he gets us." "He's not getting us," Clara said. "But if he does—" "Emmy, stop. I need to know, Mama. I need to know what we're fighting against." The girl turned and her eyes were older than her years. "He hurt you." "I know he did. I heard you crying at night. Saw the bruises you tried to hide. If he takes us back, what will he do?" Clara looked at her daughter and knew the time for protection was over. Emmy had seen too much, survived too much. She deserved the truth. "He'll separate you 3 from me. Send you to an orphanage or a boarding school somewhere far away. Tell people I'm an unfit mother, and then he'll make sure I never see you again." "Why?" "Because I'm his possession, and possessions don't get to have children or friends or any life that doesn't revolve around him." Emmeline's face hardened. "Then we can't let him win." "We won't. Promise me, Mama. Promise that if it comes down to it, if he's going to take us, you'll fight. Even if it means—" She swallowed hard. "Even if it means someone dies." Clara pulled her daughter close, held her tight, despite her injured shoulder. "I promise. I won't let him take you. Any of you. Whatever it costs." Night fell like a hammer. Nate insisted on taking a watch despite his injury, positioning himself where he could see the approach from the east. Hiram took the west. Clara and Emmeline rotated between, checking the other windows and keeping an eye on the children in the cellar. Around midnight, Tobias emerged from the cellar despite orders to stay put. He held a piece of paper and his hands shook as he showed it to his mother. The drawing was simple but effective. 4 stick figures with guns surrounding a house. Inside the house, smaller stick figures. And above it all, storm clouds and lightning. "I know, baby," Clara whispered. "I know you're scared, but Mr. Thornhill and Mr. Webb are very brave, and they're going to keep us safe." Tobias pointed at the stick figures with guns, then made a motion like something being erased. "You want them to go away?" He nodded vigorously. "Me too." Clara kissed his forehead. "Me too. Now get back downstairs with Lucy. She needs you." The boy hesitated, then hugged his mother and climbed back into the cellar. "He's a good kid," Hiram said softly. "They all are. They shouldn't have to live like this, hiding in cellars, learning to shoot, being afraid all the time. No child should, but the world ain't fair, and we play the hand we're dealt." The old man checked his rifle. "For what it's worth, I think you're doing a hell of a job raising them." "I'm doing the best I can. It never feels like enough." "That's how you know you're a good mother. Bad ones think they're doing great. Good ones always wonder if they could do better." Clara managed a small smile. "Thank you, Hiram. For everything. For helping us. For risking your life." "Ain't risking nothing I ain't risked before. Besides, Nate needed this. Needed a reason to care again. You and your kids gave him that." "He talks about his wife, Margaret. He loved her very much." "He did. And her death near killed him. I watched him turn into a ghost these past 7 years. Watched him work himself to exhaustion trying to feel something, anything. Then you showed up and suddenly, he's alive again. Angry, yes, but alive. That's worth more than you know. I don't want him to get hurt because of me. Too late for that. He's already heard his legs torn up and his barn's ash. But he's also more himself than he's been in years. So don't you dare feel guilty about that." The attack came at 2 in the morning. No warning. No sound. Just suddenly the windows exploded inward and fire blossomed in the darkness. They'd thrown torches. "Water! We need water!" Nate shouted, dragging himself upright despite his injury. Hiram was already moving, grabbing the bucket they'd filled earlier. He threw it on the nearest flames while Emmeline beat at another fire with a blanket. Clara ran to help, but her shoulder screamed in protest. She pushed through the pain, grabbing another blanket and attacking the flames that were spreading across the floor. Outside, gunfire erupted. The men were shooting at the house now, keeping them pinned while the fire spread. "The cellar!" Clara screamed. "We have to get the children!" She ran for the kitchen, threw open the cellar door. Tobias and Lucy were at the bottom of the ladder, their faces pale with terror, smoke already drifting down. "Come on, quickly!" She got Lucy up first, thrust her into Emmeline's arms. Tobias climbed up next, moving fast, despite his fear. But the fire was spreading faster. The dry wood of the house caught like kindling flames, racing up the walls across the ceiling. The heat was unbearable. "We can't stay here," Hiram shouted. "The whole place is going up." "Where do we go?" Clara looked around wildly. The front door was barricaded and probably surrounded. The back door led to open ground with no cover. "The root cellar," Nate said. "There's an outside entrance in back, if we can get to it. That's 30 yards through the snow with no cover. You have a better idea." Clara didn't, and the fire was making the decision for them. Already the smoke was getting thick, making it hard to breathe. "Emmeline, take your brother and sister. Run to the root cellar entrance. Don't stop, don't look back. Hiram will cover you." "What about you? We'll be right behind you. Go!" The girl didn't argue. She grabbed Tobias's hand, picked up Lucy, and ran for the back door. Hiram threw it open and immediately started firing, laying down suppressing fire. "Go, go, go!" The children ran into the darkness. Clara could hear Lucy crying, could hear Emmeline's breathing harsh and panicked. She prayed they'd make it. "Your turn," Nate said to Clara. "Not without you." "Clara, I'm not leaving you to burn." A beam crashed down from the ceiling, missing them by inches. The heat was overwhelming now. They had seconds maybe before the whole structure collapsed. Nate grabbed Clara's hand and pulled her toward the door. His injured leg buckled, and he nearly fell, but she caught him, taking his weight. "Together," she said. "We go together." They stumbled through the door into the freezing night air. Bullets immediately kicked up snow around them. Clara felt one tug at her skirt, another whistle past her ear. Hiram was still firing, but he was running low on ammunition. Emmeline had reached the root cellar and was trying to get the door open, but her hands were shaking too badly. 20 yards, 15. Clara's lungs burned from smoke and exertion. Nate was limping badly, his injured leg barely supporting him. 10 yards. A bullet caught Nate in the shoulder, spinning him around. He went down hard, crying out in pain. "Nate!" Clara tried to lift him, but he was too heavy and she was too weak. "Go," he gasped. "Get the kids safe. Go." "No." Hiram appeared beside them, grabbing Nate's other arm. Together, they dragged him the last few yards and tumbled into the root cellar. Emmeline slammed the door shut behind them. In the sudden darkness, all Clara could hear was heavy breathing and Lucy's quiet sobbing. "Everyone here?" Hiram's voice was rough. "Here," Emmeline said. "Here," Clara managed. Tobias made a small sound of acknowledgement. "I'm bleeding." Nate said, his voice tight with pain. "Shoulder. Bad." Clara felt for him in the darkness, found his shoulders soaked with blood. "We need light." "Can't risk it," Hiram said. "They'll see." Above them they could hear boots on the ground. The men were searching, looking for them. Clara held her breath, pulling all 3 children close. One of the men walked directly over the cellar door. Clara could see his shadow through the cracks, could hear him breathing. "They're not here," the man called. "Must have run for the woods." "Then find them." "Harlow's paying us good money for the woman. I'm not going back empty-handed." The boots moved away, the voices faded. But Clara knew they weren't safe. Not yet. Maybe not ever. In the darkness, Nate's breathing was getting more labored. The bullet was still in him, and he was losing blood fast. "We have to stop the bleeding," Clara whispered. "Hiram, do you have anything?" "My shirt." She heard him moving, heard fabric tearing. Then his hand found hers and pressed cloth into her palm. "Make a pad. Press it against the wound, hard as you can." Clara did, and Nate sucked in a sharp breath. But he didn't cry out, didn't make any sound that might give away their position. "Mama?" Lucy's whisper was tiny, terrified. "Is Mr. Nate going to die?" "No, baby. He's going to be fine." She hoped it was true. But in the darkness, with blood soaking through her makeshift bandage and Nate's breathing getting shallower, Clara wasn't sure of anything anymore. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had stopped meaning anything in the darkness of the root cellar. Above them, they could occasionally hear the men searching, cursing, arguing. The fire must have died down because the glow that had been seeping through the cracks faded. Clara's whole world became the feel of Nate's blood on her hands and the sound of her children breathing in the darkness. "Mama?" Emmeline whispered. "What do we do now?" Good question. They couldn't stay in the cellar forever. Eventually, Victor's men would give up searching the woods and come back to check the cellar. And when they did, they'd be trapped. But if they left the cellar, they'd be out in the open with no shelter, no supplies, and Nate barely able to walk. "We wait for dawn," Clara said finally. "When we can see, when we can plan. And then we fight, or we run, or we do whatever we have to do to survive." Tobias pressed something into her hand. Even in the darkness, she could feel it was paper, one of his drawings. She couldn't see what it showed, but she could guess. Family, home, safety, all the things they'd lost, all the things they were fighting to get back. "We're going to make it," she told her children. "All of us, I promise." Beside her, Nate's hand found hers in the darkness. "Don't make promises you can't keep," he whispered. "Then help me keep it. Stay alive, Nate. Please. Stay alive." Trying. His voice was weak. "Clara, if I don't you dare. Don't you dare give up on us now." "Not giving up. Just need you to know these past few days having you here, your kids, it's been the best days I've had in 7 years. If this is how it ends, at least, I got to feel alive again before I died." "This isn't how it ends." Clara's voice broke. "This isn't how our story goes. You hear me, Nathaniel Thornhill? We don't die in a cellar. We don't let Victor win. We survive. We all survive." "Okay," Nate whispered. "Okay. We survive." But his hand went slack in hers, and his breathing became so shallow she could barely hear it, and Clara had to bite her lip to keep from screaming. Dawn came slowly, gray light filtering through the cracks in the cellar door. Clara could finally see the faces of her children, see the blood covering Nate's shoulder and chest, see Hiram's grim expression. "How is he?" Hiram asked. "Alive. Barely." Clara checked the bandage. It was soaked through. "The bullet's still in him. He needs a doctor." "Closest doctor is in Silver Point. That's 15 miles through snow with Victor's men hunting us." "Then what do we do?" Before Hiram could answer, they heard voices again, close, right above the cellar door. "Check the root cellar. They might be hiding in there." Footsteps approached. A hand grabbed the cellar door handle. Hiram raised his rifle, pointing it at the door. Emmeline did the same. Clara pulled her children behind her, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. The door started to open. And then a voice rang out across the yard, loud and authoritative. "That's far enough." The door stopped moving. Clara heard confused voices, heard someone say, "Who the hell are you?" "Sheriff Amos Pike. And you men are trespassing on private property. You've got about 5 seconds to explain yourselves before I start arresting people." Clara's breath caught. The sheriff. But was he here to help or to hand them over to Victor? "We're working for Victor Harlow," one of the men said. "Looking for a fugitive." "That's so. You got paperwork." Warrant any legal documentation at all? Silence. That's what I thought. Now I'm going to ask you once to leave this property. You don't, and I'm going to assume you're the ones breaking the law here. You can't. I can, and I am. Now move. Clara heard the men retreating, heard horses galloping away. Then the sheriff's voice closer now. Thornhill, you down there? Clara Bennett, I know you're in the cellar. It's safe now. Come on out. Clara looked at Hiram. The old man's expression was unreadable. Could be a trap, he said quietly. Or it could be help. Clara looked at Nate, unconscious and bleeding. We don't have a choice. If we stay here, he dies. She made her decision and pushed open the cellar door. Sheriff Amos Pike stood in the yard of what used to be Redemption Creek Ranch. The house was a smoking ruin. The barn was gone. Snow was trampled and blood-stained from the fight. The sheriff was maybe 50, with iron-gray hair and hard eyes that had seen too much. He looked at Clara, at her children, at Hiram, helping Nate up from the cellar. Sweet Jesus, what happened here? Victor Harlow happened, Clara said. His men attacked us, burned us out, shot Nate twice. The sheriff's jaw tightened. I was afraid of something like this. That's why I rode out. Been hearing things in town. Victor's been hiring men making threats. Figured it was only a matter of time before he made a move. Are you here to arrest us? Arrest you for what? Victor says I stole from him. Says I'm a fugitive. Victor says a lot of things. Most of them are lies. The sheriff knelt beside Nate, examined his wounds. This man needs a doctor. Now, I've got a wagon. We'll take him to Silver Point. But Victor Harlow doesn't run Silver Point. I do. And attempted murder trumps whatever false claims he's making against you. The sheriff stood. Mrs. Bennett, I don't know your full story, but I know Victor's type. Known men like him my whole life. Bullies who use money and power to get away with evil. I'm done letting him get away with it. Why? Clara couldn't help asking. Why help us? You don't know us. The sheriff was quiet for a moment. Then he said, 15 years ago, my daughter met a man. Rich, charming, said all the right things. He convinced her to leave with him, promised her the world. 6 months later, we found her body in a river. Beaten so badly we could barely recognize her. His voice was steady, but his eyes were hard as stone. Man who killed her was rich. Had connections. Nothing ever happened to him. He's still out there somewhere, probably hurting other women, and I couldn't do a damn thing to stop him. He looked at Clara. But I can stop this. I can make sure Victor Harlow doesn't do to you what that bastard did to my girl. So yes, I'm helping you. And anyone who has a problem with it can take it up with me. Clara felt tears streaming down her face. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank me by getting in that wagon. We need to move before Victor realizes his men failed and sends more. They loaded Nate into the wagon as gently as they could. He was barely conscious, his skin gray, his breathing labored. Clara climbed in beside him, cradling his head in her lap. Stay with me, she whispered. Please, Nate, stay with me. His eyes fluttered open. Clara, I'm here. Did we survive? We survived, all of us, thanks to you. Good. His hand found hers. That's good. The children climbed in, huddling close. Hiram took the reins, and Sheriff Pike rode alongside as they began the long journey to Silver Point. Clara looked back once at the ruins of Redemption Creek Ranch, at the smoking remains of the home that had promised safety, at the place where for a few brief days she'd allowed herself to hope. All of it was gone now. But as she looked down at Nate's face, at his hand still holding hers, at her children safe beside her, Clara realized something. The ranch was just buildings, just wood and nails and memories. But family, real family, the kind you chose and fought for and bled for, that was what mattered. And somehow, in the midst of violence and terror and loss, she'd found it. She just had to make sure she didn't lose it again. The doctor's office in Silver Point smelled like carbolic acid and old blood. Clara sat in the waiting room with her children pressed against her sides while Doc Morrison worked on Nate behind a closed door. Every time she heard a groan of pain, her heart clenched. "Mama, is he going to die?" Lucy whispered for the 10th time. "No, baby. The doctor's helping him." "But there's so much blood." There was. The wagon bed was soaked with it. Clara's dress was stiff with dried blood, her hands still stained no matter how many times she'd tried to wash them. Sheriff Pike stood by the window watching the street. His hand never strayed far from his gun. "They're out there," he said quietly. "Victor's men. I counted 3 so far. Just watching. Waiting." "For what?" "For me to leave. For you to be vulnerable. For any opening they can exploit." He turned to look at her. "Mrs. Bennett, I need you to tell me everything, the whole truth. Because if I'm going to stand between you and Victor Harlow, I need to know exactly what I'm dealing with." So Clara told him. All of it. James's death, the poverty meeting Victor, the 8 months of escalating abuse and control. The night she finally ran. The 4 months of running. The shooting outside Silver Point. When she finished, the sheriff's expression was grim. "Thomas Webb, the merchant Victor killed. I knew him. Good man. Helped my wife when she was sick, wouldn't take payment. I always wondered about his death. Self-defense never sat right with me. Victor's good at making things sit right, at making people believe his version of events. Not this time." The sheriff pulled a telegram from his pocket. "I sent wires to St. Louis last night. To the territorial marshal, to the circuit judge, to every law officer I could think of. Asked about Victor Harlow. And you're not the first woman he's done this to. There have been 3 others over the past 10 years. All of them disappeared. One turned up dead in a river. The others were never found." His voice was hard. "But Victor's rich and rich men don't get investigated unless someone with power pushes for it. So nothing ever happened. Until now. Until now. Because territorial law supersedes local corruption. And because I'm done watching evil men hide behind money." The door opened and Doc Morrison emerged, wiping his hands on a bloody towel. He was 70 if he was a day, with a shock of white hair and steady hands that had sewn up more bullet wounds than he cared to remember. "He'll live. Lost a lot of blood, but the bullets are out and the wounds are clean. He's tough, that one. Tough and stubborn." Clara felt something loosen in her chest. "Can I see him?" "He's sleeping. Best thing for him right now. But yes, you can sit with him." She stood, then looked at her children. "Emmeline, watch your brother and sister." "I want to see Mr. Nate," Lucy protested. "Later, baby. Let him rest." She followed Doc Morrison into the back room. Nate lay on a narrow bed, his chest bandaged, his face pale but peaceful. She pulled a chair close and took his hand. "You scared me," she whispered. "When you went unconscious in the cellar, I thought—" Her voice broke. "I thought I'd lost you." His fingers twitched in hers, but he didn't wake. Doc Morrison checked his pulse, listened to his breathing. "He'll sleep for a while. The laudanum I gave him should keep him under for a few hours. Best thing you can do is rest yourself. You look like you're about to fall over." "I'm fine." "You've been shot, your house burned down, and you've been up for 2 days straight. That's not fine, Mrs. Bennett." His voice softened. "I've got a room upstairs where you and your children can stay. No charge. Consider it my contribution to standing up to bullies." "I can't accept charity." "It's not charity. It's human decency. Something this town could use more of." He gestured to the door. "Go. Sleep. I'll watch over him." Clara wanted to argue, but exhaustion was catching up with her. The adrenaline that had kept her moving was fading, leaving behind bone-deep weariness. "Thank you, doctor." "Thank me by getting some rest." The room upstairs was small but clean. 1 bed, a washstand, a window overlooking the street. Clara got her children settled, all 3 of them piling into the bed together like they had when they were smaller, when the world was simpler. "Mama." Tobias's hands moved slowly, forming the signs Clara had learned over the years. Are we safe now? For now, yes. But Victor's still out there. Yes. Emmeline propped herself up on one elbow. What's going to happen, Mama? Really? Clara looked at her eldest daughter, at the girl who'd grown up too fast, who'd seen too much. She deserved honesty. I don't know. The sheriff says he can help us, says he's going to make sure Victor faces justice. But Victor's rich and powerful, and the law doesn't always work the way it should. So we might have to run again. Maybe. Or maybe this time we stand and fight. I don't want to run anymore, Emmeline said fiercely. I'm tired of being afraid. Tired of looking over my shoulder. I want to stay in one place. I want... She stopped, her voice breaking. I want what other kids have. A home, a school, friends, a normal life. Clara pulled all three children close, holding them as tight as she could. I know, baby. I know. And I'm going to do everything in my power to give you that. I promise. But even as she said it, Clara wondered if it was a promise she could keep. She must have dozed off, because the next thing she knew, someone was pounding on the door. She jerked awake, her heart racing, reaching instinctively for a weapon she didn't have. Mrs. Bennett, Sheriff Pike's voice. We've got trouble. She was on her feet, immediately checking that her children were still asleep before slipping into the hallway. The sheriff stood at the top of the stairs, his face grim. Victor's here, downstairs, demanding to see you. No. That's what I told him, but he's threatening to get a court order. Says he has legal right to speak with you about the theft charges. There are no theft charges. He made them up. I know that. You know that. But he's got a fancy lawyer with him, and they're making noise about pressing formal charges if you don't agree to meet. Clara's hands clenched into fists. He's using the law as a weapon. If I refuse to see him, he'll have me arrested. If I do see him, he'll try to manipulate me, threaten me, make me look unstable. So what do you want to do? She thought about it. Thought about 4 months of running, of being afraid of letting Victor control her life, even from a distance. Thought about her children sleeping in the next room, exhausted from terror. Thought about Nate lying in a bed downstairs with 2 bullet wounds because he'd chosen to protect her. I'll see him, but not alone. You stay with me, and I want Doc Morrison there too. Witnesses. You sure about this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. Victor Harlow sat in Doc Morrison's waiting room like he owned the place. His expensive coat was immaculate despite the cold outside. His hair was slicked back, his shoes polished to a shine. He looked prosperous, respectable, successful. He looked like everything Clara wasn't. Beside him sat a thin man in a dark suit carrying a leather briefcase. The lawyer. Victor stood when Clara entered, his face arranging itself into an expression of concern. Clara, thank God. I've been so worried about you and the children. Don't. Her voice was flat. Don't pretend you care. But I do care. You're confused, possibly ill. Running across the country with 3 children in winter, it's madness. You need help. What I need is for you to leave me alone. Victor's expression shifted just for a moment, showing the cruelty underneath. Then the mask was back. I'm afraid I can't do that. You stole from me, Clara, a significant amount of money. I have documentation. He gestured to the lawyer, who pulled papers from his briefcase. $43.16, taken from my restaurant's cash box the night you disappeared. That was my wages, money you owed me for 3 months of work. So you admit you took it. I took what was mine. That's not how the law sees it. The lawyer's voice was smooth, educated. Mr. Harlow has records showing that money belonged to his establishment. Unless you can provide proof that these wages were owed, receipts, employment contracts, anything at all, this constitutes theft. Clara felt the trap closing. She had no proof. Victor had never given her written documentation of her employment. Everything had been verbal under the table, leaving her with no legal standing. This is ridiculous, Sheriff Pike said. You can't seriously expect... I expect justice, Sheriff. Victor's voice was reasonable calm. If Clara can repay what she owes, I'm willing to drop all charges. Consider it settled. She and the children can go their separate way, and we'll forget this unpleasantness ever happened. I don't have $43. Then we have a problem. Victor leaned forward. But I'm willing to be generous. Come back to St. Louis, work off the debt, say 6 months. With fair wages this time, proper documentation. At the end of it, you'll be free and clear. The children can stay at a good boarding school while you work. They'll be safe, educated, well cared for. Separated from me, you mean? Under your control. Under my protection. Clara, be reasonable. Look at yourself. You're homeless, penniless, traveling with a man you barely know. What kind of life is that for children? What kind of mother puts her children through this? The words hit like physical blows. Every fear Clara had ever had about her inadequacy as a mother, every moment of doubt, every time she'd wondered if her children would be better off with someone else, Victor was using it all against her. That's enough. Doc Morrison's voice cut through the room like a scalpel. Mr. Harlow, I've been practicing medicine in this territory for 40 years. I've seen a lot of mothers, good ones, bad ones, everything in between. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that Clara Bennett is one of the finest mothers I've ever encountered. With all due respect, Doctor, that's not your determination to make. Maybe not. But this is my office, and I'm asking you to leave. We're not finished here. Yes, you are. Sheriff Pike stepped forward. Mrs. Bennett has answered your questions. Now get out. Victor stood slowly brushing imaginary dust from his coat. His eyes never left Clara's face. This isn't over. I'll be back with proper legal documentation. A warrant. And when I return, you'll have a choice, Clara. Come willingly, or be dragged back to St. Louis in chains. Either way, you're coming back. You belong to me. I belong to myself. We'll see. He left the lawyer trailing behind him. The moment the door closed, Clara's legs gave out. She sank into a chair, shaking. He's going to win, she whispered. He's going to find some legal way to take me back, take my children away, and there's nothing I can do to stop him. That's not true. Sheriff Pike crouched in front of her. Listen to me. Victor's playing a game using the law as a weapon, but two can play that game. I've got my own telegrams out, my own connections. Give me time. How much time? He said he'd be back with a warrant. Takes time to get a warrant. Has to go through a judge, has to have proper documentation. Even with Victor's money, that's at least a few days, maybe a week. And what do we do until then? We build our own case, get testimony from people who saw Victor's abuse, track down the other women he hurt, show the pattern of behavior, make it so that when this goes before a judge, Victor's the one who ends up in chains, not you. Clara wanted to believe him, but hope was dangerous. Hope led to disappointment, to crushed dreams, to even more pain. Mrs. Bennett. Doc Morrison's voice was gentle. Your friend upstairs is awake, asking for you. She stood on shaking legs and climbed the stairs to Nate's room. He was propped up on pillows, his face still pale, but his eyes clear. Clara. I'm here. She sat beside his bed, took his hand. How do you feel? Like I got shot twice, but alive, thanks to you and Hiram and the sheriff. He studied her face. Something happened. What's wrong? So she told him about Victor's visit, about the theft charges, about the threat of a warrant. Nate's jaw tightened. He was here in this building. He's gone now. Did he threaten you? Not directly, just made it clear that he's not giving up. That one way or another, he's taking me back to St. Louis. Over my dead body. That's what I'm afraid of. Clara's voice broke. Nate, you almost died because of me. Your ranch burned down because of me. I won't let you sacrifice anything else. Too late. Already sacrificed my heart. She stared at him. What? I'm in love with you, Clara. His voice was rough but steady. Been falling since the moment you collapsed on my porch. Maybe even before that, in some place deeper than logic. And I love your children like they were my own. So you trying to push me away to protect me? Not going to work. Nate. I know it's fast. I know it's crazy. I know I'm supposed to wait a respectable amount of time court you properly do everything by society's rules. But we're past rules now. We're in a fight for survival. And I need you to know where I stand. I stand with you. Always. Tears streamed down Clara's face. I don't deserve you. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. You deserve everything good this world has to offer. And I'm going to make sure you get it. He tried to sit up, winced in pain. We're going to beat Victor. Going to make him pay for everything he's done. And then we're going to build a new life. Together. The ranch is gone. We'll rebuild. Better this time. Bigger. A place where all of us can fit. Where your kids can grow up safe and happy. Where you never have to be afraid again. That's impossible. So was surviving 2 bullet wounds. So was you walking miles through a blizzard with a bullet in your shoulder. So was your daughter learning to shoot in 2 days. We've done a lot of impossible things, Clara. What's one more? She leaned forward and kissed him. Not passionate, not desperate, just gentle and full of gratitude, and maybe love. Okay? She whispered against his lips. Okay. We fight. The next 3 days were a blur of activity. Sheriff Pike worked tirelessly sending telegrams, interviewing witnesses, building a case. Doc Morrison offered his spare room to Clara and the children indefinitely. And townspeople began to choose sides. Some sided with Victor. He was rich, respectable, and his version of events that Clara was a disturbed woman who'd stolen from him and run away sounded plausible to people who didn't know better. But others sided with Clara. The Chinese shopkeeper who'd seen Victor's men threatening people. The widow whose daughter had been courted by Victor years ago and barely escaped. The bartender who'd overheard Victor making threats. Slowly testimony accumulated. Nate healed faster than anyone expected, driven by sheer stubbornness and the need to be on his feet. By the 3rd day, he was walking his arm in a sling, but his spirit undaunted. You shouldn't be up, Clara scolded when she found him in Doc Morrison's office reviewing maps with the sheriff. Can't lie in bed while Victor's out there planning his next move. You're going to tear your stitches. Then Doc can sew me back up. Clara, look. He pointed to the map. Victor's staying at the Grand Hotel. His men are scattered around town watching, waiting. But he hasn't made a move in 3 days. Why? Because he's waiting for the warrant, Sheriff Pike said. I checked with the territorial judge. Victor's lawyer filed paperwork yesterday. Judge is reviewing it now. How long before he decides? Could be today. Could be a week. Judges don't like being rushed. So we're just waiting. Sitting targets. Not sitting. Preparing. The sheriff pulled out a thick file. I've got statements from 12 people documenting Victor's pattern of abuse and intimidation. I've got evidence linking him to Thomas Webb's murder. I've got proof that the other women who disappeared were all connected to him. This isn't just about Clara anymore. This is about taking down a man who's been operating above the law for years. Will it be enough? I don't know. But it's what we've got. That afternoon, Emmeline asked to speak with Clara privately. They walked to the edge of town, where snow-covered fields stretched toward the mountains. Mama, I need to tell you something. About Victor. Clara's stomach clenched. What about him? That night, the night we ran from St. Louis, I saw something. Emmeline's voice was steady, but her hands shook. I woke up because I heard shouting. You and Victor. I came downstairs and saw... She stopped, swallowed hard. I saw him hit you, saw you fall, and then he saw me watching. Emmy. He told me that if I ever told anyone what I'd seen, he'd make sure something bad happened to Tobias and Lucy. He said accidents happen to children all the time. And I believed him. So I never said anything. Not to you, not to anyone. I just pretended I didn't know. Oh, sweetheart. Clara pulled her daughter close. That's not your burden to carry. That's not your fault. But if I'd told someone maybe nothing, You were scared. You were protecting your brother and sister. That's not wrong, Emmy. That's love. I want to testify. If this goes to court, I want to tell the judge what I saw. I'm not afraid anymore." Clara held her daughter tighter, feeling fierce pride mixed with terror. "Are you sure Victor's lawyer will try to discredit you? They'll say you're a child, that your memory is unreliable, that you're lying to protect me." "Let them try. I know what I saw, and I'm done being silent." That night, Victor made his move, not with violence this time, with words. He published a notice in the Silver Point Gazette laying out his version of events. Clara Bennett, disturbed widow, had stolen from him, seduced him, then fled when confronted with her crimes. She was dangerous, unstable, unfit to care for children. He was offering a reward to anyone who could help bring her to justice. By morning, half the town believed him. Clara read the notice in Doc Morrison's office, her hand shaking. "He's destroying my reputation, making it impossible for anyone to believe my side." "He's making a mistake." Sheriff Pike tapped the paper. "This is libel. Printed lies. We can use this against him." "How? Everyone reads the newspaper. Everyone believes what they read." "Not everyone." Hiram appeared in the doorway. He'd been staying at a boarding house in town, watching over them. "There's a town meeting tonight. Victor called it. Says he wants to address the community, clear the air." "It's a trap." "Of course it is. But it's also an opportunity. He's expecting you to hide, to stay silent. What if you don't? What if I show up? What if we all show up?" Hiram's expression was fierce. "You mean Nate the sheriff, everyone who's on your side. Face him publicly. Let the town see both sides and decide for themselves." "That's risky," Sheriff Pike said. "Victor's good at public speaking, at manipulation. He could turn the crowd against Clara. Or she could turn them against him." Nate stood in the doorway, one arm still in a sling, but his eyes blazing. "I've watched Clara face down impossible odds for days now. She can face down Victor Harlow in a town hall." Clara looked at all of them. These people who'd chosen to stand beside her, to risk everything for a woman they'd known for less than a week. These people who'd become her family. "All right," she said. "I'll do it. I'll face him." The town hall was packed. It seemed like every person in Silver Point had shown up, cramming into the wooden building, filling every bench lining the walls. Clara stood at the back with Nate and Hiram, her children, beside her. Victor stood at the front, commanding the room like a practiced orator. His lawyer sat beside him, papers spread across a table. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. I know there have been many rumors, much speculation about my presence here. I want to set the record straight." He launched into his story. How he'd employed Clara out of charity. How she'd seemed grateful at first, but then became demanding, unstable. How she'd stolen from him and fled with her children, putting them at risk. How he only wanted to help her, to make sure the children were safe. He was good, persuasive, reasonable. Clara watched people nodding, saw skeptical looks directed her way. "So, I ask you good people of Silver Point to help me. If you see this woman, if you know where she's staying, please contact me or the authorities. Not to punish her, but to help her. To make sure those innocent children don't suffer any more than they already have." He sat down to scattered applause. Sheriff Pike stood. "Anyone else want to speak?" Clara's legs felt like water. But she forced herself forward, forced herself to walk down the center aisle, while every eye in the room tracked her movement. She reached the front and turned to face the crowd. "My name is Clara Bennett, and everything Victor Harlow just told you is a lie." Murmurs ran through the crowd. Victor's face darkened. "I didn't steal from him. I took wages I was owed after 3 months of work without payment. I didn't put my children at risk. I got them away from a man who threatened to separate us, who hit me, who killed a good man for trying to help me escape." "Those are serious accusations," someone called out. "Can you prove any of it?" "Yes." Clara looked at Emmeline, who stood and walked forward, her young face set with determination. My daughter was a witness. Emmeline's testimony was clear, unflinching, devastating. She described what she'd seen, what Victor had said, how he'd threatened her younger siblings. When she finished, the room was silent. Then others began to speak. The Chinese shopkeeper, the widow, the bartender. One by one they stood and added their voices to Clara's, building a wall of testimony that even Victor's money couldn't topple. This is absurd. Victor was on his feet now, his mask slipping. These people are lying. They've been paid or coerced or they're telling the truth. Sheriff Pike stood as well. Mr. Harlow, I've been investigating you for days now. I've got testimony linking you to the deaths of 3 women. I've got witnesses who saw you abuse Clara Bennett. I've got evidence that you've been operating a criminal enterprise for years, hiding behind money and influence. You have nothing. You're a small-town sheriff with delusions of importance. Maybe. But I've got enough to hold you for questioning while the territorial marshal investigates. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. He gestured to his deputies. Victor Harlow, you're under arrest for assault, attempted murder, and suspicion of homicide. The room erupted. Victor's lawyer jumped up, protesting. Victor himself tried to run, but the deputies were faster, grabbing his arms, forcing them behind his back. You can't do this. I have rights. You have the right to remain silent, Sheriff Pike said calmly. I suggest you use it. As they dragged Victor toward the door, he locked eyes with Clara. The hatred there was pure, undiluted. This isn't over, he hissed. I'll get out. I'll find you. And when I do, you'll do nothing, Nate said, stepping forward. His voice was quiet, but carried through the room. Because you're going to spend the rest of your miserable life in a cell thinking about all the women you hurt, all the lives you destroyed. And every day you'll remember that you lost. That a poor widow with 3 children and no resources beat you. That's your legacy, Harlow. Defeat. They hauled Victor out into the cold night. The room stayed silent for a long moment. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Then the whole room erupted in applause. Clara stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. It was over. After 4 months of running, of fear of looking over her shoulder, it was finally over. Emmeline threw her arms around her mother. Tobias and Lucy joined them. And Clara held her children while they cried together, releasing months of terror in great shaking sobs. Nate watched from a few feet away, giving them their moment. But when Clara reached out a hand to him, he came wrapping his good arm around all 4 of them, pulling them close. We did it, Clara whispered. We actually did it. You did it, Nate corrected. You stood up when it would have been easier to run. You fought when it would have been easier to surrender. You saved yourself, Clara. All I did was stand beside you. That's everything, she said. Standing beside someone is everything. And in that moment, surrounded by her children and the man who'd risked everything for them, Clara Bennett finally let herself believe in something she thought she'd lost forever. Hope. The territorial marshal arrived from Denver 3 days later, a hard-faced man named Coleman, who'd seen enough corruption to fill a dozen lifetimes. He spent 2 days interviewing witnesses, reviewing Sheriff Pike's evidence, and questioning Victor Harlow in his cell. On the 3rd day, he called Clara into the sheriff's office. Mrs. Bennett, I've reviewed everything. The testimony, the evidence, the pattern of behavior. Victor Harlow is going to stand trial for multiple counts of assault, attempted murder, and 3 counts of suspicion of homicide. He'll be transported to Denver within the week. Clara felt her knees weaken. He's really going to prison. For a very long time, if I have anything to say about it. And as for the theft charges he filed against you, Coleman pulled out a document and tore it in half. Dismissed. There's no evidence you stole anything. Just a rich man trying to use the law as a weapon. What about my children? He said he'd try to take them. Claim I was unfit. Any judge who reviews this case will see that you're a devoted mother who protected her children from a dangerous man. You have nothing to worry about, Mrs. Bennett. You're free. Truly free. The word felt foreign. Free. Clara had been running for so long she'd forgotten what freedom felt like. Thank you, Marshal. Thank you so much. Don't thank me. Thank Sheriff Pike. And thank yourself for being brave enough to stand up and fight. Most people don't. When Clara left the office, Nate was waiting outside. His arm was still in a sling, but he was healing quickly, stubborn determination speeding his recovery. Well, it's over. Really over. Victor's going to prison. Nate's face split into a grin. He wrapped his good arm around her and pulled her close. I told you we'd win. You did. I just didn't believe it was possible. Believing is the hard part. Doing is easy when you've got the right people beside you. They stood together in the winter sunshine, snow melting in the streets, the whole world feeling impossibly bright. So what now? Clara asked. Your ranch is gone. We're homeless. We've got nothing but the clothes on our backs and whatever charity people have given us. We've got each other. That's not nothing. It's not a roof over our heads. Then we build a roof. We rebuild the ranch. Better this time. Stronger. Nate, that'll take months. Maybe years. We can't live in Doc Morrison's spare room forever. No, but we can stay with Hiram until we get the house framed. He's already offered. Says his cabin's small but warm and he's tired of living alone anyway. Clara looked at this man who'd given up everything for her and her children. Who'd been shot twice, lost his home, risked his life, and was still standing here making plans for their future like it was the most natural thing in the world. Why are you doing all this? I told you, I love you. You barely know me. I know enough. Know you're brave and strong and you love your children more than life itself. Know you fight for what's right, even when the odds are impossible. Know you make me want to be better than I am. He cupped her face in his hand. No, I don't want to spend another day without you in it. Nate, marry me. The words hung in the cold air between them. Clara stared at him, her heart hammering. What? Marry me. Not someday, not when things settle down, not when it's proper and respectable. Now, today, tomorrow, as soon as we can get Reverend Crane to perform the ceremony. That's crazy. Probably. But I've already lost 7 years being careful and proper and dead inside. I'm done wasting time. I want to marry you. Want to adopt your children and give them my name. Want to build a life together that's loud and messy and full of love. He got down on one knee, right there in the street, ignoring the pain it caused his healing wounds. Clara Bennett, will you marry me? Tears streamed down her face. Yes. God help me, yes. He stood and kissed her right there in the middle of Silver Point's main street, not caring who saw or what anyone thought. And Clara kissed him back, pouring 4 months of fear and hope and desperate love into that kiss. When they finally broke apart, half the town was watching and smiling. Well, Sheriff Pike drawled from his office doorway, about damn time. They were married 4 days later in Silver Point's small church. Clara wore a dress borrowed from the widow who'd testified on her behalf, simple blue calico that had been mended a dozen times but was clean and warm. Emmeline and Lucy wore matching dresses, gifts from the Chinese shopkeeper's wife. Tobias wore a suit that was too big for him, but he stood straight and proud anyway. Nate wore his only good shirt and pants that Hiram had mended where the bullet holes were. His arm was still in a sling, but he stood tall and steady as Reverend Crane began the ceremony. The church was packed. Doc Morrison sat in the front row, beaming. Sheriff Pike stood as a witness, his wife beside him. Hiram gave Clara away, walking her down the aisle with tears in his eyes. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Nathaniel Thornhill and Clara Bennett in holy matrimony. Clara barely heard the words. She was too focused on Nate's face, on the love and certainty she saw there. Do you, Nathaniel, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? I do. And do you, Clara, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness, and in health, until death do you part. Clara looked at Nate, at this man who'd saved her life in every way possible, and said with absolute certainty, "I do." Then, by the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Nathaniel, you may kiss your bride. He did gentle and sweet a promise of all the tomorrows they'd have together. The reception was held in the church hall, neighbors bringing food they could barely afford to share, the whole town coming together to celebrate this unlikely union. Clara watched Nate dance with Lucy, watched Emmeline laugh with the shopkeeper's daughters, watched Tobias finally smile, really smile for the first time in months. "Happy?" Hiram asked, appearing beside her with a cup of punch. "More than I ever thought possible. 6 months ago I was trapped in St. Louis with a man who wanted to own me. Now I'm married to a man who wants to set me free. How did my life change this much?" "You made choices, hard ones, brave ones, and you didn't do it alone." "No, I had help. Had you and Nate and Sheriff Pike and this whole town." She looked around at the people who'd stood beside her. "I spent so long thinking I had to do everything myself, that asking for help made me weak. Asking for help is the bravest thing you can do. Takes strength to admit you need people." "I need people," Clara said softly. "Need Nate. Need my children. Need friends. For the first time in my life, I'm not afraid to need." They moved into Hiram's cabin the next day. It was small, barely big enough for 3 people, let alone 7, but they made it work. The children slept in the loft. Hiram took the small bedroom, and Nate and Clara shared the main room, a blanket strung up for privacy. It should have been awkward, cramped, uncomfortable. Instead, it was perfect. Every morning, Clara woke to the sound of Nate building up the fire, to Lucy's giggles, as Hiram told her stories to Emmeline, helping Tobias with his reading. Every evening, they ate together around the small table, passing bowls of stew and bread, talking about their days, planning for the future. And at night, when the children were asleep and the cabin was quiet, Nate would hold Clara and they'd talk about dreams, about the ranch they'd rebuild, about the life they'd create, about growing old together. "I want a big house this time," Clara said one night, nestled against Nate's chest. "Big enough for all of us, with a room for each child, and a real kitchen with a stove that doesn't smoke, and a porch where we can sit on summer evenings. We'll build it. Might take a while, but we'll build it." "How long?" "Foundation goes in as soon as the ground thaws. Frame up by summer. If we work hard and get help from neighbors, we could have the basic structure done by fall. Finish the inside over winter. Be moved in by next spring. A year from now, we could have a real home." "We have a real home now. Home isn't a building, Clara. It's people. It's family. It's this right here." He squeezed her gently. "But yes, a year from now, we'll have a building to put our family in." "What about money? Building a house costs money we don't have." "I've got some savings. Not much, but enough to start. And we'll make the rest work. I can hire out as a ranch hand while we're building. You could take in sewing, washing, whatever you're willing to do. We'll scrape together enough." "I don't mind hard work. I've been working hard my whole life. But Nate, I want to contribute equally. Want this to be our ranch, not just yours." "It is ours. The moment you said yes, everything I have became ours. The land, the plans, the future, all of it." Clara was quiet for a moment. "I love you. I don't think I've said that yet, but I do. I love you so much it scares me." "Why does it scare you?" "Because I could lose you. You could get sick or injured or just decide this is too hard and leave." "I'm not leaving, and I'm not dying if I can help it. But Clara, even if something did happen to me, you'd survive. You've survived worse. You're the strongest person I know." "I don't feel strong. I feel scared and uncertain, and like I'm waiting for something terrible to happen." "That'll pass. Give it time. You've been running for so long your body doesn't know how to stop being afraid. But eventually you'll realize you're safe. That this is real. that nobody's going to take it away. She hoped he was right. Spring came slowly to the Colorado mountains. The snow melted in patches, revealing brown grass and mud. The creek that gave the ranch its name swelled with runoff rushing and loud. And on the first warm day in March, they broke ground on the new house. Nate had drawn up plans over the winter. A 2-story structure with 4 bedrooms upstairs and a large kitchen and living area downstairs. A porch wrapping around 3 sides. A root cellar dug deep to keep food cool. It was ambitious, maybe too ambitious, but Nate insisted. We're building for the long term, for grandchildren someday, for a legacy. The whole town came out to help. Sheriff Pike brought his sons to dig the foundation. Doc Morrison provided medical supplies in case of injuries. The Chinese shopkeeper donated lumber at cost. Even the widow who'd testified against Victor showed up with her adult sons ready to work. "Why are you all doing this?" Clara asked as she watched neighbors raise the first wall frame. "We can't pay you. We have nothing to offer." "You gave us something better than payment," the widow said. "You gave us proof that standing up to evil works. That good people can win if they fight together. That's worth more than money." By June, the frame was up. By August, the roof was on and the windows were in. By October, they were working on the inside walls floors, a massive stone fireplace that would heat the whole house. And through it all, life continued. Emmeline enrolled in school and discovered she loved learning. Tobias began speaking again, 1 word at a time, his voice rusty but determined. Lucy turned 6 and declared she was going to be a doctor like Doc Morrison when she grew up. Clara took in sewing her skilled hands, creating dresses and shirts for half the territory. The money wasn't much, but it was honest work that let her contribute to their future. And Nate healed both his body and his spirit. The wounds from the shooting faded to scars. His shoulder regained full movement, and slowly the ghost of Margaret that had haunted him for 7 years finally rested. "Do you still think about her?" Clara asked one night as they lay in bed in their new house, the children asleep upstairs, the future stretched out before them. "Sometimes, but not with pain anymore. Just gratitude that I had her for the time I did, and gratitude that I have you now. There's room in my heart for both. I'm glad. I wouldn't want you to forget her. Never. But I'm not living in the past anymore. I'm living right here, right now with you." Their first Christmas in the new house was magical. They couldn't afford much, but Clara made rag dolls for Lucy, carved horses for Tobias, and a new dress for Emmeline. Nate built each child a small piece of furniture, a desk for Emmeline, a stool for Tobias, a toy chest for Lucy. And on Christmas morning, with snow falling outside and a fire crackling inside, and children laughing around the tree, Clara realized she'd found something she'd stopped believing existed. Peace. Years passed. The ranch grew from 200 acres to 500, then to 1,000. They ran cattle and horses selling to the army forts and mining camps that dotted the territory. Money was always tight, but they managed. Emmeline grew into a beautiful young woman, smart and capable. She finished school at the top of her class and surprised everyone by announcing she wanted to be a veterinarian. "There's no school for that," Nate said. "Not for women." "Then I'll learn from doing. Doc Morrison says he'll teach me about animal medicine if I apprentice with him." She did, spending 3 years learning everything the old doctor could teach her. By the time she was 20, she was the best animal doctor in 3 counties, treating everything from cattle to cats with equal skill. Tobias never became much of a talker, but his hands spoke volumes. He carved and built, creating furniture and sculptures that people traveled miles to buy. His art decorated homes throughout Colorado, each piece telling a story without words. And Lucy did become a doctor, studying in Denver and returning to Silver Point to open a practice. She was fierce and competent, never backing down from a challenge, never accepting no when someone needed help. "They're going to be fine," Clara said one evening as she and Nate sat on their porch watching the sun set over the mountains. They were both in their 50s now, gray-haired and worn by hard work, but happy in a deep, bone-settled way. Better than fine. They're going to change the world, our kids. Your kids, too. You adopted them, remember? Made them Thornhills. Best decision I ever made. Well, second best. First was asking you to marry me. Clara leaned against his shoulder, comfortable and warm. Do you ever regret it, taking us in all the trouble we brought? Not for 1 second. You gave me my life back, Clara. You and those kids. You made me remember what it felt like to be alive. We made each other alive. They sat in silence as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed. Closer they could hear Hiram, now in his 80s, but still stubborn, arguing with Emmeline about the proper way to treat a horse's cough. Do you think we'll have grandchildren? Clara asked. Emmy's been seeing that young rancher from over the ridge. Tobias has had his eye on the schoolteacher. Lucy's too busy saving lives to think about marriage, but she's still young. I'd say yes, we'll have grandchildren. Probably more than we can count. I'd like that. A house full of children again. The sound of little feet running through these rooms. We built a good life here, didn't we? We built the best life. Not perfect, but real. Honest. Full of love. Nate turned to look at her, his gray-green eyes still as sharp as they'd been 25 years ago when she'd first collapsed on his porch. I love you, Clara Thornhill. More now than I did the day I married you. More than I thought possible. I love you too, and I'm grateful every single day that I found you, or that you found me, however it worked. I think we found each other, two broken people who put each other back together. They sat together as night fell, stars coming out one by one in the vast Colorado sky. Inside the house, lights glowed warm and welcoming. This house they'd built together, board by board, nail by nail. This life they'd created from nothing but determination and love. Clara thought about Victor sometimes rotting in a Denver prison for crimes he'd finally been held accountable for. Thought about the woman she'd been when she first arrived here, desperate, frightened, certain that happiness was something other people got, but never her. That woman seemed like a stranger now. The Clara who'd walked miles through a blizzard with a bullet wound was gone, replaced by someone stronger, surer, at peace with herself and her place in the world. What are you thinking about? Nate asked. How far we've come. How much we've survived. How grateful I am that you took a chance on a widow with 3 kids, and nothing to offer but trouble. You had everything to offer. You just couldn't see it yet. And now you know what I've always known. That you're extraordinary. That your children are extraordinary. That this life we built together is extraordinary. He stood and held out his hand. Come on, let's go inside. I hear Lucy's making her famous apple pie for dessert. Clara took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. Together they walked toward the warm glow of their home, toward the sound of their children's voices, toward the life they'd fought so hard to create. Behind them, the ranch stretched out in the darkness land. They'd claimed animals, they'd raised buildings they'd constructed with their own hands. A legacy that would outlast them, that their grandchildren and great-grandchildren would inherit. But the real legacy wasn't the land or the buildings. It was the love they'd proven possible, the family they'd chosen, the courage they'd shown in the face of impossible odds. It was the simple truth that sometimes when the world tries to break you, the bravest thing you can do is stand up and say, I deserve better. I deserve love. I deserve a home. And then fight like hell to make it true. Clara had done that. Had fought through poverty and abuse and months of running. Had protected her children with everything she had. Had found a man willing to stand beside her instead of trying to own her. Had built a life that was loud and messy and imperfect and absolutely beautiful. As they reached the porch, Clara paused and looked back one last time at the land spread out before them, silver in the moonlight. No regrets? Nate asked. Not a single one. Good. Neither do I. They walked inside together, closing the door on the cold night, stepping into warmth and light and laughter. Into home, into family, into the life they'd earned through blood and tears and unwavering love. And if somewhere in a Denver prison, Victor Harlow raged at the bars of his cage, bitter that a poor widow had defeated him, well, that was justice. Clara Bennett Thornhill had won. Not because she was perfect or lucky or even particularly special, but because she'd refused to give up, because she'd chosen hope over despair, because she'd believed even in her darkest moments that she and her children deserved better. And in the end, that belief had saved them all. The notice had said, hiring ranch cook meals for one room provided. Simple words that had changed everything. A desperate widow with 3 children had answered that notice and found not just employment, but salvation. Not just shelter, but home. Not just safety, but love. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask for help. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is accept it. And sometimes the most beautiful thing you can do is build a life from broken pieces and call it whole. Clara had done all 3. And in doing so, she'd proven that no matter how dark the night, morning always comes. That no matter how hard the fight, victory is possible. That no matter how broken you are, you can heal if you find the right people to help you carry the weight. She'd found her people. And together, they'd built something that would last forever, a family forged not by blood, but by choice. By sacrifice. By love that refused to surrender. That was her legacy. That was their story. And it was more than enough.